tweaks that both parties are always looking to make and have discussions about. But we're very optimistic about the future of our partnership with the Players Association.
By the way, we are so lucky because when Mark comes, he brings Chase Kressel from NBA Communications, who, by the way, is our executive producer of this. He doesn't know it. We got 2 more interviews, so he's going to be standing there holding that until his arms are sore. But that's what happens when you're with number 2. So what do you say to the worldwide audience who's watching this on Facebook and Reuters about where the NBA is and where it's going?
Well, the NBA, like I said, this is the best it's ever been in terms of the competition on the court. These players just compete at a level that is just amazing to watch. I, as a fan, am so excited to be here and to watch these 2 teams compete. And I think the fans around the world are going to be treated to a wonderful contest.
By the way, Mark Tatum, academic entrepreneur, very successful in earlier life. Are you liking what you're doing?
I love what I'm doing. This is my dream job. I played sports growing up, played throughout college, and for me to be able to work in the business of sports, it's a dream come true.
Kim Mandera from NBA Communications here. You know, interesting, when Mark walked over here, it's like the Pope, like the water party. It used to
Gary Bettman, by his own accord, is the longest-running commissioner of any league, and the National Hockey League certainly has been honored by his commissionership. Locks out the players, one of the early first things on the job, but has grown to a consistent and well-respected leader all over the NHL, in fact, all over sports. Contributor to our Sport Business Handbook. Honored to hear Gary Bettman.
Do you remember the song I Will Always Love You by Whitney Houston?
Yes, I do.
Well, let me tell you why it's important. When you were appointed as commissioner February 193, that was the song that was #1 on the charts. It makes us feel both old, doesn't it?
Actually, in the quiet moments when you and I together.
We're going to take a short break, but when we return, more Rick Horrow, the sports professor. Welcome back to Beyond the Scoreboard with Rick Horrow. We pick up right where we left off.
In the quiet moments when you and I together, you sing it to me on a regular basis.
You are a senior statesman in the league and senior statesman in sports. And when you went to Cornell undergrad and you were just getting through your career, did you ever think that you'd ever be running a $4 billion hockey operation and be the longest-standing commissioner in the sport and longest-standing commissioner in North American sports?
Well, the answer to that question is very easy. If I were to say yes, you'd either think I was lying or insane. But the fact of the matter is no. I went to Cornell. I was in the School of Industrial and Labor Relations, had a wonderful, wonderful undergraduate experience there, went to NYU Law School, and went to one of the big New York firms. I had started out to be a lawyer. I was always a hockey fan. I was always a sports fan, but I never imagined that this is what things would turn into. The great news about being in sports, particularly being at the NHL, is you have an opportunity to forge relationships with wonderful people, and that is what makes the job exciting, stimulating, and fun.
All right, you can do it. Give me your 30-second elevator speech assessment of the overall health of the game.
The game itself, what the players do night in and night out, has been nothing short of spectacular. Our competitive balance is probably the best not only in our history but in all professional sports, and you're witnessing that in these incredible playoffs. And the business of the game has never been stronger, never been bigger, and that's a testament first and foremost to having the best fans in all of sports.
All right, let's get specific. Let's talk about TV. You got a couple of Game 7s. You got a weekend to yourself. NBC TV is happy. Rogers is happy. Canada is happy. International is happy. What's up with TV?
Television's good. It's making everybody happy. The coverage of the game, particularly in the United States, has never been more extensive. NBC does a phenomenal job, both principally on NBC and on the NBC Sports Network. And in the early stages of the playoffs, they used their other outlets to ensure, for the first time in our history over the last 3-4 years, that every game of the playoffs is televised on a national basis in the United States. Their promotion, their coverage, everything they do is first rate, and it's brought the game to more people in the United States than ever before. In Canada, we are the preeminent television property, and Rogers is doing a phenomenal job giving fans wall-to-wall coverage. We are very fortunate to have two great partners for our national packages, both in Canada and the United States.
Well, let's talk about Canada. You've got three of the top teams net worth-wise. You've got enlightened management, exchange rate coming around. You got good play. How have you turned it around in Canada?
Well, first of all, we don't pay a whole lot of attention to the Forbes numbers on the valuations because they don't have access to the financials of any of the clubs. It's a bit of a shot in the dark. I suppose, if anything, it shows trending, and the trending is that franchise values are higher than they've ever been. When people focus on our game, when you look at it in Canada, there's nothing comparable, I think, for any sport anywhere in the world to the relationship that our Canadian fans have to our game. And it's almost breathtaking to see that level of connection. And while we have great fans throughout the world and great fans, avid fans, I think more avid than any other sport in the United States, the fact is our fan base isn't as large as a percentage of the population in the U.S. as it is in Canada, but the fan base is growing. It's growing day by day. And that's a testament to the fans we have, to new technology, to what NBC has been doing, and what we do with our sponsors and business partners.
Which is more important to you, the fact that the revenue was about $400 million when you took over in '93 to nearly $4 billion now, that franchises are worth nearly $500 million now, up 20%, or that you've had labor peace since 2005?
I have a saying that drives people crazy around here, that everything's related to everything else. The fact is, we were in '93 a little over $400 million. We're approaching roughly $4 billion. Do the math. We've been talking about what the cap is likely to be. So, it's in that ballpark. But the fact of the matter is, everything starts with the health of the game on the ice. And we have a system that works, that creates incredible competitive balance, that gives fans of whatever team you want to root for the hope that your team can make the playoffs, and every team has that hope. And once you make the playoffs, anything can happen, and that's what we're witnessing. We're better able to connect fans to the game. We're getting more exposure and promotion, particularly in the United States, than ever before. And so all the pieces of the puzzle are important when you're growing the game and the business of the game.
Is 30 teams too many, or just about right?
All of our teams are in the best shape they've ever been in. A couple still have some work to do, but our ownership situation is the strongest. Franchises are the most stable they've ever been.
Let's talk international. You expanding, obviously, across the pond, but our Thomson Reuters audience ought to know and wants to know, what about the Olympics? What's your process today?
We haven't given much thought to the Olympic process. We're currently focused on bringing back the World Cup, which we'll do in September of 2016, and that'll be a great tournament. We do international efforts, events, in conjunction with the Players Association. We're joint ventures in doing that, and over the last few years, until Don Fear took over the union as executive director, there was a lot of instability, so we weren't able to pursue many of the initiatives that we wanted to. Now that the union is stabilized, we're working together, and I think the World Cup will be the foundation that's our jumping-off point for doing a whole lot of other things. We're a sport with a great history and tradition relative to international play and international competition, more so than perhaps any of the other North American sports leagues. Roughly 25% of our players, some of the most elite players in the world, come from outside of North America, and we're going to make sure that our reach continues to grow outside of North America.
You get along with Don Fear? Are you planning for the future now?
Yeah, no, we're in the midst of a long-term collective bargaining agreement. The union has never been stronger or more stable in recent years, and that's a good thing. And so we're able to work together and engage in a number of initiatives that will benefit fans and hopefully grow the game as well.
You're known as a franchise bulldog. You save franchises that are worth saving. You'll go to bat for those markets like Phoenix, but it doesn't always work. Look at Atlanta going to Winnipeg. In that context, what about the Florida Panthers?
Florida's in a rebuild. There were some fundamental things that had to be addressed and fixed, and the good news is under Vinny Viola's ownership, the commitment and the resources are there to put the right things in place. The team is more competitive than it's been in some time, and the response from the community has been quite strong.
Which criticism do you find most unfair, even if it's inaccurate, that you've attempted to Americanize the game to the detriment of Canada, or that you expand into the Sun Belt at the expense of more traditional hockey markets in Canada or the northern U.S.?
You know, I don't pay a whole lot of attention to that. The fact of the matter is we're trying to make the game stronger, bigger, everywhere it is. The fact is I was instrumental in instituting the Canadian Assistance Program in the late 90s, early 2000s when there were problems with the Canadian franchises. We want the game strong wherever it is. We're excited about the future prospects of our game everywhere. But we focus foremost on the places where we are, which are Canada and the United States, and whatever else we may do, including worldwide, we know where the priority is.
So if you were commissioner for a day and you could wave a magic... You are commissioner for longer than a day. So if you wave a magic wand and you didn't have to worry about building consensus, what major change would you make?
I don't know. I mean, the fact of the matter is that's fantasy land. There are no magic wands. Things require consensus. There's no magic bullets in anything. It's all about hard work. It's a great time to be a hockey fan, and that's what drives me more than anything else.
Are you traveling less and enjoying life more?
Traveling lots and enjoying life. I love what I do, and while travel's part of what I do, it's not something that I find to be unduly burdensome. It's fun to get out, see how organizations present their games in their own arena.
We're going to take a short break, but when we return, more Rick Horrow, the sports professor. Welcome back to Beyond the Scoreboard with Rick Horrow. We pick up right where we left off.
Present their games in their own arenas, to interact with fans everywhere we go. That's part of the fun of what I get to do.
Where is Gary Bettman 5 years from now?
If I feel the way I do today, I think there's a song that goes like that, I'll still be doing the same thing. I love what I do. It's fun, it's interesting, it's a great challenge, and there are great opportunities, and as long as the Board of Governors is happy with me and I have the same level of interest and energy and commitment, then we'll keep doing this.
Paul Tagliabue, commissioner for over 16 years, a Covington and Burling lawyer, came up through the ranks, and during his time, the NFL grew in value, where at the same period it significantly outstripped the New York stock market. Obviously, franchises, international, television, labor peace, many things Paul Tagliabue can give us. He certainly, as a contributor to our Sport Business Handbook, gave me some very significant perspective. Here's Paul Tagliabue.
So 69, 20 years at Covington and Burling, you actually began the pioneering of corporate lawyer working for a league to commissioner. David Stern, Gary Bettman. Talk about the transition. And at some point when you were a lawyer, did you ever think, boy, I'm going to run this league?
To the last point, the answer is no. I never thought I would run the league. And the transition was really fairly easy because I had been immersed for 20 years as outside counsel. But maybe more important, I had a great teacher and tutor in Pete Rozelle. So he let me know how to do things, and I followed his playbook.
Over the last 20 years, if you invested in an NFL franchise, had the capability of doing it, your values would go up year over year, according to Forbes, about 11.6%. If you invested in the stock market, the Standard & Poor's, it'll go up 4.5%, testament to the structure, but also your leadership. Go run the stock market. But more important than that is that you have a viable business, and its biggest metric for owners is increase in franchise values. What's your perspective on that?
Well, my perspective is that we were fortunate in the 90s mostly, but also in the beginning of the 21st century, to get some things in place that had to be put in place. One of the most important was free agency and the salary cap. Another was diversification in television, moving beyond ABC, CBS, and NBC, and moving into cable in an intelligent way, leaving most of the games on broadcast television, moving with ESPN, moving with DirecTV into the satellite, and taking advantage of the technology that exploded in the 80s and 90s, and now the explosion is really accelerating.
How about gambling? When I was working with you and we talked about how to put the core of stadium financing together, there was the admonition of, we have a Chinese wall relative to Indian land, Indian gaming, casino sponsorships, Vegas. The whole issue is now clearly blurred, and the Raiders are going to Vegas, et cetera, et cetera. When was the tipping point when all of this was acceptable, or was it gradual? And how, where's the ceiling? Are we going to have casinos in stadiums, for example?
Well, I think the tipping point has come about because of a couple of things. Number one is the public acceptance of gambling. Going back in time, there wasn't that level of public acceptance that there is today. Sometimes for considerations of public policy, sometimes for personal considerations about what does gambling represent, other than the tax on the low-income people in the United States. But secondly, I think, is the technology and the transparency of gambling as it is today. And, I've talked to people who said that the concern about athletes being induced to fix games or throw games, which happened to me when I was playing at Georgetown. We had a game where the other side took money from bookies not to beat the point spread. The feeling is that can be managed now with the transparency and the data analysis that's available. So I think those two things on parallel tracks contributed to the tipping point, which the Supreme Court not only reached the tipping point, but hit it with a hammer with its recent decision saying that the federal law that limited gambling to one state or two states was not legal.
And look how prolific the revenues will be, even relative to team valuations in the future.
I hear a lot of different estimates. Some of them are sky high, some of them are not so sky high. It's going to depend on whether there is congressional legislation and what kinds of restrictions and limitations are put on the gambling on sports.
Totally understood. So, ladies and gentlemen, here is an exclusive that you probably didn't know before, but I have visual evidence. I found you in South Africa researching the viability of an NFL expansion team in Cape Town. Is that correct?
Well, you found me in Cape Town in June of this year, and I was very interested in football down there and what the great game that Nelson Mandela talked about, and the ability of sports, including football, to bring people together. But it was not for an NFL expansion.
No, of course I'm kidding, but is a world coincidence. We found each other on respective trip to Robben Island. But a segue into, it was great seeing you there, but the segue into expansion, NFL in London, NFL in Canada, NFL in Mexico, NFL as one-off games. Talk about that generally.
Well, I think that the one-off games are likely to continue for a while, maybe for a long while, because the idea of having a division outside of the United States with long-distance travel, I don't think is realistic. And it may not be realistic in the current environment to think of a league that's got more than 32 teams. So I think the London experiment might be extended to Europe. I've read about the possibility of games in Germany, which was the heart of NFL Europe when we had it. But I think that you're not going to see divisions and conferences outside the United States. What you could see would be feeder leagues in Canada, Mexico, and Europe over time. And I think that would be a great thing for the sport.
World League of American Football 2, basically?
Yes.
Or something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah, okay. All right, let's go off the field for a couple of minutes. We talked earlier in life about the new rules and what's happening, and are we tackling right the roughing the passer issues? Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think when you discuss those issues, you have to start with the competition committee. And the competition committee has been a great feature of the NFL structure. Some fans know it well. They could tell you who's on the competition committee. They can tell you when it meets. They probably read its reports today online. So, but I think that's been a key to the growth of the game, to changes in the game, the swing from a game that was predominantly running to a game that's predominantly passing. And I think the other huge factor, aside from how the competition committee has been an effective steward of the rules of the game, is the change in the athletes. Athletes today are very different from athletes 40 years ago, just in terms of size, skill, speed, and a sense of invulnerability that comes from looking like bionic men and the equipment that they're using. So you have to take all those things into account as you look at the rules changes.
Talking about basketball, Georgetown, congratulations, by the way. And nobody knows this, but he is the other 33 on the Georgetown University basketball team. You're in the Hall of Fame. Congratulations.
Well, number 33 is in the Hall of Fame, which was the number that I wore when I played at Georgetown.
So who else? Somebody else wore it?
It was also worn by Patrick Ewing, and I only got in the Hall of Fame after he wore it, not me.
Got it. Understood. But you had the rebound record for a long time at Georgetown.
Yes,
right?
yes.
And also, more relevant to this, through 2008 to 11, you were chairman of the board of trustees and on the board for a long time. So you have a perspective of college athletics that few people do. Overall take of where college athletics is today and where it's going.
Well, I think overall college athletics are solid and an important part of higher education. I think that the balance between academics and commerce could use some tweaking. And as you know, I'm a member of the Knight Commission, and the Knight Commission has been working with the NCAA to try and have an influence on redirecting some of the revenues that come from athletics to broader purposes. And I think the other aspect that needs more attention is the scholarship system, because the athletes, especially in Division I football and basketball, are committing so much time now to athletics. I think the scholarship should be more than 4 years. It might be 5, 6, or even 7 years, and the athletes should be rewarded in ways that take account of their academic performance, not just their performance in football or basketball, and that would apply to both men and women's sports.
What's the biggest change since you've left that you've noticed, structurally, on-field, off-field, whatever?
Well, I think the biggest change for the NFL and for the other professional and amateur sports, for that matter, the collegiate, is the way media has exploded and the way media has become available to everybody through the internet technology and digital technology and the proliferation of devices that we referred to earlier. The social media has become a major factor in the way people communicate at all levels, in all contexts, and it exposes everybody to criticism on a targeted basis. And as we found out in the last year or two, it can also be manipulated and misused by foreign countries. So I think if you look at, like, as I said, when I left, the iPhone and social media like Facebook hadn't even started up. Now they dominate our daily lives. You can't be in a conversation without someone saying, "Well, let me look at my phone and see what the answer to that is." That's a big change.
If and when you sit down with Roger Goodell, do you basically tell him the game is in good hands, or do you say we've got to make the following changes?
No, my perspective with Rogers, I think the game is in good hands, and the game on the field is really strong, and that's the critical thing, and that's a tribute to the college game. It's a tribute to the players in the NFL who have not been changed by the money that's in the game today, the salaries they get. You still have people competing as if it's a life and death competition, which in some cases, for people's employment, can be the end of a career because they get cut. But
we're going to take a short break, but when we return, more Rick Horrow, the sports professor. Welcome back to Beyond the Scoreboard with Rick Horrow, the sports professor. We're going to rewind the show a little bit and pick up from there. Here's Rick Horrow.
The game is fantastic. The number of really good young quarterbacks right now is exciting.
You've done okay with yourself for the first 70-plus years of your life. What about the next 70-plus?
I'm looking at the next 70 plus, not the next 70. I just want to keep looking at the life through the front windshield and not through the rearview mirror. That's been my philosophy since I retired, and I think it's been worthwhile.
The game is in good hands, and I'm incredibly honored to have you here. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
On August 4, Don Garber begins his second 20 years as commissioner of the MLS. coming from the NFL, from a marketing perspective and background, he has significantly increased the value of MLS franchises, grown soccer in North America on the kids level, on the girls level, and certainly his MLS platform, expanding into a number of teams that will reach 30 in the not-too-distant future. Here's Don Garber.
So, Commissioner, it's really important. Two things. Congratulations. First of all, being in the Sport Business Handbook, which is more important to me than it is to you, but there are a lot of other people in there. And second of all, August 4, 20 years.
Yeah.
So, August 4, 1999. Any idea that you'd be here 20 years from now presiding over a league where the average franchise value is $240 million and probably more, because Forbes always underestimates?
Yeah, I mean, never. I never expected it, Rick. So it's been a great 20-year ride. It's been hard, but enormously fulfilling. The league's in a great spot, thanks to our owners and all the people that believe in Major League Soccer, from our fans to our players to all of our administrators.
Well, watching the dynamic of a meeting like this and just sitting back and watching how you comfortably preside as any veteran commissioner / CEO would preside over a group that has ultimate confidence in you. It's got to be rewarding where, I don't want to minimize it, but a lot of this is on automatic pilot, and you can say something in a meeting and people will understand that that's the way it is without questioning it. How's that?
No, that's not true. I think it's getting
it's getting better.
The longer you're in it, Rick, I remember David Stern once told me that his life got easy when every single team that was around the table he had brought in.
Yeah.
So you have a relationship with those clubs from the time they're interested in coming into Major League Soccer through their purchase process to their ongoing engagement with their club and with their city. So I know them all. I've known them all for a long time.
When the other leagues, and this is not about comparing you to the other leagues, although we could make a great pro rata case over the last 20 years. We won't do that because you're not going to take the bait. 20 stadiums, 7 new stadiums, $3 billion in construction, your people say. And when other commissioners take the lead, it's we got existing stadiums, so we'll get around to trying to figure it out. You were kind of on the hot seat early. You understood how important stadiums were to your deal, and you had to get a public-private partnership done in a model that it never worked before.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, Rick. I mean, that is the story of our league over the last 20 years. Certainly one of the big stories. Billions and billions and billions of dollars invested in infrastructure, not just stadiums, but training grounds. And, that creates permanence, and it creates a home for our fans and our players.
And so the whole thing also, it's not just marketing, but it's substance behind marketing. Did you ever think that James Harden would be a significant piece of driving up the enterprise value of the MLS?
I never did, and I'm happy he has.
It's amazing, but it happens all over the country,
Fun,
right?
cool.
Yeah, it definitely. And so television issues, Eric Shank's here today. Other television executives understand as well the whole issue of where television's going. But yet there's more product, there's more diversity, there's Sinclair, there's RSNs, and that whole world.
Yeah, I mean, we're the content business. Live content's driving a lot of the energy in the over-the-top OTT world. The fact that we have a very young fan base that's very sanguine in the world of digital absorption and engagement, I think it bodes well for us.
One more comment that's interesting after watching you as a veteran, incredibly adeptly fielding expansion questions relative to the people that, notwithstanding the fact you're not going to give it, want a commitment, not only today and where and how much and whatever, but it's got to be heartening to know that you got way more bidders and way more interest than you have spots.
I think it's a credit, Rick, to where soccer in America is. That it's a good value proposition for those who are interested in investing in sports. The sport is on the rise. We've got the World Cup coming in 2026. We've got lots and lots of energy around Major League Soccer, and you put all those things together, and successful people who've got money to invest and have a passion for sport and a particular passion for soccer, it seems to be a really good opportunity for them.
Yes and no. I mean, the no is, it's an environment of soccer, but over the last 10 years, you go from $30 million expansion fee to $300. What's that number? It's a big, like it's 100,000%. I don't know what the number is, but it's a pretty significant percent, and it's market driven.
Yeah, I mean, it is driven by sort of the increase in opportunity. I don't think it's just about bidders. I've heard that story before. I don't care how many bidders you have. If something's not valuable, really smart people are not going to bid on it. Just because there are a lot of them doesn't mean that it's going to drive up prices, right? That's just basic economics.
couple of quickies. What do you say when people point to the $3.5 billion value of like Real Madrid and Barcelona and Man U, and they say the value here is smaller? Obviously, you got 30 teams. It's the largest.
It speaks to the opportunity, Rick. I mean, if you can own a soccer team and in La Liga in Spain or own it in England with Arsenal, then they're going to be valuable. Part of it is because of the popularity of the sport. We're going to work hard to make MLS more popular so our teams become more valuable.
So in 2026, when the World Cup is here, are you still running MLS?
I doubt that.
Wow, that was a pretty damn candid answer. I think I probably got more of a candid answer than you give anybody else. But obviously, the league continues to move forward, and the legacy is there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that there's been. I mean, I think that would be almost 30 years or something like that. I don't see that happening.
Yeah, well, but you've created an incredible legacy.
No, it would be 28 years.
So
that's a long time.
It's a long time for anything. So 100 of the greatest 50 years of the sports business, 100 people involved. Again, I really, really, really appreciate it and am honored that you're in this book, and the book is better for having you in it.
Great.
Finally, in our best of, Rob Manfred succeeded Bud Selig, and he knew labor, but people didn't realize how adroit Rob Manfred has been in the marketing world, and obviously very important perspective as the labor piece continues, franchise values grow, internet grows to an entirely different level. Stadium development as well. Got to solve Oakland, got to solve Tampa, but Rob Manfred certainly is up to it. Here's Rob Manfred.
Commissioner Rob Manfred, so it's September of 1959, and it's your first birthday party, and you're sitting there, I assume, in Rome, New York. And were you thinking at that time that you'd end up being commissioner of baseball 50 or so years later?
I'll be honest with you, I didn't think I was going to be commissioner of baseball when I went to work for MLB in 1998, and probably didn't even think that 10 years later. It was really not my goal. When I went to work for baseball, I was focused on improving what had been a really sorry state of labor relations, and that was really my goal.
It's not an other league comparison, but it is an interesting parallel career track with basketball and hockey and football that, at least with Paul Tagliabue and, of course, Gary and David Stern, you don't start out intending to be a commissioner. You start out at a law firm. You end up working for that league through that law firm, and then the rest is history. Interesting dynamic, isn't it?
It is. It is. I think that you've seen a change in that area. I mean, I think at one point in history, it was common for leagues to take outsiders, outside lawyers, whatever. I see the current generation of commissioners a little bit different. Adam, myself, Roger, all came up through the ranks. I mean, I started as an outside lawyer, but I was there for 14 years inside before I was elected.
Is there an automatic time where you raise your hand and say, all right, it's been 14 years, I paid my dues, here it is? Adam, a little bit, Roger, 18 years and counting?
Yeah. Look, it happens organically, right? I mean, people start to talk about it in the business, people start to write about it, and that's really how you become a candidate.
You are, at this point, one of the valuable perceptions is not a whole lot of people know you, and I don't mean that as a negative, but there's certainly advantages not to be the lightning rod. Mm-hmm. Give us an idea of what you do day to day, the important stuff you do day to day.
Well, I'm a routine person in terms of my daily activities. I try to begin the day with some exercise. I'm pretty religious about that. During the season, I get to the office. The first thing I do is review the replays from the night before. I think our replay system is a fantastic piece of technology, and it is actually fun to look at the videos and decide whether I could have gotten it right with or without super slow motion. And then, in a routine day in the office, I spend a lot of time with my 6 direct reports. I have a lot of really strong people that work with me on a day-to-day basis, and if I can can get through the 6 of them in a day, I have a pretty good idea about what's going on in the business.
And so Bud Selig, among his other wonderful legacy items, he was known as a great communicator.
Mm-hmm.
And the rumor was he talked to every owner every day. Not possible. There's not enough time to do all of that. How important is communicating? Certainly, it's important to know what the owners want, but how important is direct communication to the owners?
Direct communication with the owners is crucial. I mean, there's 30 of them. They are your constituency. I keep a little tracking sheet so that, if somebody goes a while and I haven't spoken to them in the ordinary course, just routine business, I do try to reach out and make sure that I've been in touch with each of the 30 in relatively short periods of time. Once a day, I think was an exaggeration with Bud and probably not possible for me in terms of work schedule. We do try to communicate different ways. We have taken to a monthly update for our owners, directed specifically to them as to what we're doing in the office, what's going on, what we think's happening in the industry. And I do use email and more modern forms of communication that Bud was not enamored of.
What do you think your legal and business role is relative to the labor union? Your bosses are the owners,
right?
And are your labor, are they partners or are they allies? They're certainly not adversaries relative to labor peace these days. So characterize.
Look, I think we have a positive traditional union management relationship with the MLBPA. We've worked very hard within the normal construct of labor relations that's laid out under federal law to have a positive working relationship, to foster the notion among our players that working together is the best way to grow the business.
And so you've been obviously involved with baseball. Let me get the numbers right. 28 years, but full-time 18?
19.
19, you don't even remember. Yeah.
No, I started full-time in 98, so 17 years.
And then CEO for a little brief time until that was redefined. What have you discovered as commissioner that you didn't expect?
Well, I think the two things that really have struck me. Number one, you have to be so much more careful about what you say, particularly what you say publicly. In the various roles that I had since I came inside, I would do public things, but people didn't pay that much attention to them. Now you have to be real careful about what you say. And secondly, it's just the time demands are very, very different. There's a certain sort of public aspect to the job, but I am and remain a task person. There are things that I need to get done in the office, and balancing those two things is tricky.
It's that linear thinking that we're taught as lawyers.
Right.
That's the bottom line.
There's a problem, you got to solve it. Right.
Got to solve it. Let's do real quick, because you can't solve all of these today, but let's do rapid fire substance for a couple of minutes. Hall of Fame.
We're going to take a short break, but when we return, more Rick Horrow, the sports professor. Welcome back to Beyond the Scoreboard with Rick Horrow. We pick up right where we left off.
Steroid user Hall of Fame issues long term.
I think it's a writer issue. There's always been issues with respect to individual players that the writers have to sort out, and it's their job.
Oakland A's, San Jose, Bay Area stadium issues.
Want to see a new facility, preferably in Oakland.
World Baseball Classic.
Huge fan of the World Baseball Classic. I think it's a key to the internationalization of the game, and intend to continue to grow the product.
154 game schedule.
Huge economic issue for us. Lost TV revenue, lost gates, but something that's at least worth thinking about.
Length of games.
I think that it is a topic that we will continue to work on. I think we're off to a great start on it. Great player cooperation this year has produced good results.
Can you hit a curveball?
No.
Okay, that's quick. What excites you about baseball? You're a fan?
I'm a huge fan. I'll tell you, the first experience that I had walking into a ballpark was walking up into the bowl and seeing the actual field at Yankee Stadium.
How old were you?
I was 10 at the time. It was 1968.
is the most important thing you want baseball fans to know about you?
What I think, I want fans to come to understand that we're open to discussing changing the game. We're prepared to consider new ideas, and we're also prepared to admit that some of the ideas we may have out there don't turn out to be right.
So January 25 this year was your D-Day.
Right. It was nice. It was a Sunday. It's kind of hard to know what to do on that Sunday.
Yeah, but the media found you anyway.
Right.
So the 5th year anniversary of your commissionership, so 2020, what will you have done?
I hope that we will have reclaimed the next generation for baseball. I think the most important challenge for us is to make sure that we pass on to the next generation of fans baseball the way that our parents passed it on to us.
Try to hit that curveball. It's going to help you.
I will.
We'd like to thank all of our special Best of guests in a special edition, not only thanks to Andrew Luck, but Oliver Luck, to Nick Sikevich, Mark Tatum, Gary Bettman, Paul Tagliabue, Don Garber, and Rob Manfred, all giving us reasons why all of these leagues are in very good hands. We'd like to thank you for listening and joining us next week when we go Beyond the Scoreboard.